So while we're posting up some more 40K stuff, Kill Team and Tyranids, board gaming, Battletech, D&D, I want to get through some mailbag. I'm going to pull from some comments on the blog, over here on my YouTube channel and Twitter, and kind of condense them all together and see what we can do and what we can explore here. So the first question was the new release, or the upcoming release of Talisman. And I'm not talking about Talisman for kids, the reskin that Games Workshop is putting out there. Certainly I'm a massive fan of the game. I've got all the Fantasy Flight expansions on there, all the print on demand. We get together about once every 3 or 4 months to play a massive, totally cutthroat game. And the simple charm of roll and move, I find it somewhat refreshing. Yes, it has limitations. Yes, some of those cards are wildly unbalanced on there, and the character classes aren't balanced. But it's interesting in this day and age of board gaming. I love Gloomhaven. I love Gloomy. But it's a beast to make your way through on, and it's got a lot of interesting components to it, but it's a major commitment and a major strategy on there. On the other hand, sometimes just playing roll and move and getting a little bit of that fantasy itch where I don't have to worry. I literally don't have to worry about the rules. I can just see the entire story unfolding. That has that appeal also with it. The reskin and kind of the Talisman IP/DNA metrics of how it works, mechanics, that Games Workshop is essentially selling out to everyone. I mean, okay, I probably won't get involved in that. I mean, if there's a Talisman Harry Potter, I don't need to buy in that. I'm not that much of a completionist. If they were going to do a really interesting reskin on there, would that cause me to rebuy? I don't know. We'd have to think about that. And one of the things I always wondered was, what if GW released a Talisman proper, the expansions over time and everything like that, but they included mad miniatures. They pulled in tons of miniatures. Look, you could set it in Age of Sigmar or whatever, and kind of have it a miniature move game with terrain and all this type of stuff. That could be really interesting, and that would probably cause me to buy in. What I'm hoping for, on a side note, in terms of the IP and the reskin, I would love to see a re-release of Relic Part 2. I love Relic. I've got the expansions. It's the type of game when I don't feel like playing 40K right now, but I'm with the guys and we want to play 40K. Right now, Blackstone Fortress is occupying that. For a while, it was Space Hulk, but Relic's that type of game where you feel like you're an Inquisitor, or you feel like you have a narrative based on the faction on there. Yes, it's roll and move, but you have 3 attributes on there. You've got some control. I love the idea that it has corruption, so you can embrace the dark gods and take those powers on there. But there are some mechanics that tie it down. There are some places where it needs to be streamlined on there. Could a part 2 do that? I would be very interested, especially given the massively high production value that Games Workshop is putting out. I mean, just look at Blackstone Fortress on that. Relic, I could see possibly doing a rebuy on that, although nothing's wrong with the base game. So moving into apparently Age of Sigmar Skirmish. I know they were doing... Warhammer Community was talking about, it's not Winds of Magic. I mean, it is Winds of Magic. Back when the old world was around, they released this, it's interesting, the timing of Apocalypse and this kind of big battle for Age of Sigmar. It was Winds of Magic, right? I got to go look at the book. I have the book. It has the spinner in there. Essentially, you'd flip this little spinner, an arrow would spin around, and that would show you the winds that were active, and your wizards could activate and summon these monsters. And, of course, the monster kits were like $150 kits from GW, but dragons and demons and kind of they had a really nice Chimera model. A lot of great stuff on there, and I would have loved to play that game. I totally would have bought into it. That part of Warhammer Fantasy, but by then it was really getting towards the end and no one was going into that. If they re-release that for Age of Sigmar, that could be really interesting, especially given the updates and the plastics and the kits that they are putting out. That would cause me to have a second look. Age of Sigmar Skirmish? Possibly. Yeah, possibly. It depends if the Skirmish is just head-to-head, blow some stuff up. Not really, because the few Age of Sigmar games that I've played, they tended to be a little bit smaller in size. Almost, it's like Age of Sigmar wants to be Skirmish anyway. I mean, I know you can play larger games. I've seen larger games. I've watched them. I would like to see like a Kill Team-esque Skirmish, but with a story. Essentially Mordheim. Run around, get some weird stone, get some artifacts, level up, and kind of have that aspect to it. I think that lends just easier based on how our minds work as opposed to like futuristic sci-fi. So I'll keep an eye out for that, and I'm curious to see what they're going to push out. Blackstone Fortress, the Traitor Commissar, and the Rogue Ogren, where's the news on that? That should already be on its way, pre-ordered. I can't get enough Blackstone Fortress, and I want to see those new heroes released out of there. I mean, Fortress is just on an absolute roll. Dark Souls. Am I the minority out there? I like Dark Souls, the board game. I do. Steamforged has... I was originally sad-faced that I didn't get in on the Kickstarter, and now, boy, was that a blessing in disguise. I mean, is there any game out there... Even AVP was handled better than the Kickstarter for Steamforged. But the game itself, while there are pieces that are a little bit unpolished, and there are pieces where it's a little bit grindy on there, it works for what it does. You get in there with your heroes, you pull some gear, you fight on some minions, you level up with souls, you fight a mini-boss, a main boss, and a mega-boss. Where's my Diablo the board game on there? Think about that. If they released a Diablo board game, forget about this Diablo Immortal, whatever, and don't even get me started on the new Skyrim, something I've been waiting for, and playing Skyrim mobile. Okay, it's early release. I got the custom helm, and I got the special sword for signing up for the pre-release, but the timer is just brutal on it. I mean, I understand it's a pay-to-play, and you want me to buy your gems, but the fact that it takes forever to open a chest, and I can only carry so many, despite upgrading, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and you start building houses and gear and stuff, and it just takes forever and ever, and everything is this, craft a sword, come back in 6 hours, or pay 20 gems. Build a house, come back in 5 hours, or pay 20 gems. Why are you limiting me that much from playing? It's just a slog. It's just an absolute grind. So it's on the phone. It's there. I'm kind of playing it. I wished it was sort of a open world Diablo-esque type game from the perspective of the Elder Scrolls, but it is pre-release, and we'll see in the next couple of patches on there. But with that, take whatever you were going to dump into Diablo Immortal, which I'm a massive Diablo fan. I'm waiting for. I have high hopes for. I did buy Alien Blackout against when I knew I shouldn't have, but I'm a sucker for the Alien franchise on there. Who knows where things go with these podcasts and vlogs, right? But if we had a Diablo the board game, you sell me the core, you give me some monsters, just throw the Butcher in there and a few others, and you're set to go. Then you sell some X packs of minions, sell the moon goats and the blood goats and all those things. And then sell magic item packs, just blind draw packs, even though everybody hates them, where it's you get these 50 item cards, and imagine if there's sets and you distribute them out. People will be buying cards like mad to play. I mean, it's a license to print money on there. So Dark Souls has that feel to it. It does it about 80%. It's good for what it is. The original question, and that was really kind of a side rant, Dark Souls, the card game. I don't have it, but I've had a chance to play it from another friend of mine that's a massive Souls fan. I mean, he's the type of guy that his entire wardrobe is basically Souls t-shirts. And what I liked about the card game it's essentially the board game. I mean, it is. It's essentially the board game without the miniatures. The idea was they developed the flow and the IP in the board game with the miniatures. They had the assets. So Steamforged is like, let's just make it a card game and strip it down and have it work on that way. It works. It's really not a bad type of dungeon crawl boss fight all on one thing. Do I need both? No, because I have the miniatures game. If I was going to do it again, or the miniatures game, if I would do it again, I'd go for the minis. Because being a Wargamer, that's so seductive. I can't help myself with it. If it was down the road and the current Souls game was too hard to find, even secondhand, then I'd go in on the card game. Or if space was a premium, or you want something quick to play, because there is a little bit of a time crunch on the miniature game, it's not bad. It does what it says it's going to do on the box. So Pathfinder, the Adventure card game, a new release coming out soon on there. And I'm curious to see where it is. Now, Pathfinder, much like Talisman, it's kind of roll and move in that you randomize some decks, okay? You go to the location, you flip the card, you essentially make a skill check, roll some dice, play a card, maybe add another die in there with blessings and stuff, and close the location out. It seems simplistic, but it just works. By throwing in all these random combinations, it works on there, and it has a really, really good campaign. And it continues to be. I've had the chance to play all the sets. I only own Rune Lords. My buddy owns the rest, so I'm happy to play those. I like the narrative the most behind Rise of the Rune Lords on there. Looking for a reboot, I'm kind of on the fence. I would recommend at this point not picking up, obviously, the core or any of the others, maybe even if you're thinking secondhand, simply because this new set is going to be a kind of universal base set when it gets released, jumping in that allows you to build up the entire collection. And from what I've seen with the artwork and the cards and the streamlining of mechanics, it is what it is. It's a new edition of it, and it is a superior edition. What I would really like to see, and maybe they've incorporated this, I do have to check in the next update. What I would love to see is a random dungeon based on level, or a random quick one-off play with it. Rise of the Rune Lords does a great job in delivering you a card-based campaign. And that's part of the addiction of it, in that not only are you going through a story, and a very good story, by the way, your character is leveling up with choices for new abilities and new powers. You're constantly getting new gear and spells and allies. Not only do you want to see the story, you want to keep playing because you want to get more bling and you want to level up. And it does it fast enough so every single adventure you're making progress. Yet at the same time, it's not so fast. It is a card game versus a miniatures game. Something like Massive Darkness, which in one session takes you from level 0 to essentially godlike D&D gold box on there. But the Pathfinder, it does that. But you need to commit to playing the campaign. Either that, or you're playing the early first few adventure paths on there. You're not jumping into the last. I would like to see... I'd like to dip in and do just like a random type adventure where you could pick a challenge rating or pick a level, stack the deck, and play it. Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game. The adventure card game does this really, really well. And that, if you're looking for a dungeon delve type card game, there is still opportunity for that. And this is a missed opportunity. It's just timing. This was released by Fantasy Flight, I'm going to say 2016, 2017, right before Games Workshop yanked the IP, or they gave up the IP, whatever it was. Essentially, it took the Warhammer Quest, Warhammer Fantasy pre-Sigmar assets, artwork, narrative set in the old world, and it's this card game that you adventure through. So you have a location, and the location is random based on the mission, and you build a deck, and you fight random monsters, and there's a boss monster that interacts based on threat as it rises on the game. it works. It plays very fast. It's got dice. But it also has some good resource management based on what you want to do. So both the Eurogamers and the Ameritrash gamers, they're happy on there. The narrative and the artwork is fantastic. The story is fantastic. It plays through a campaign. But it also has a random dungeon delve on there, which lets you play as if you're going through like endless dungeon levels on there. It does both really, really well, really, really solid in a compact game. I know it's still on Miniature Market for like clearance for like $15, $20. I've got 2 sets, one that I play all the time and that we beat on, and one that's just stashed away in like the Doomsday Bunker to play it, because it really is a great, nifty little game. I know Fantasy Flight, when they lost the IP, they've now reskinned it to be in Terranoth and kind of do that whole thing. They've changed some mechanics. I don't know, the art really doesn't do it for me, and the storyline isn't really my thing, but at least with that, there's going to be, I mean, it's solid rules-wise and mechanics, but with that, it's going to at least get some sort of love and some sort of continuation on there, pushing ahead, pushing forward. Battletech. So we've got the starter sets, the Game of Armored Combat with all of them. We've got the head-to-head, what I'm calling the head-to-head set, which is the 2 miniatures in there. This is a good time to jump into Battletech because the miniatures are fantastic. The starter set's got good value. They release hex maps. There's a lot of missions, a lot of fan content. You could, it's not a crippleware starter set. I mean, X-Wing Miniatures had us all fooled. Here we are, we thought it was a miniature 1.0 anyway. We thought it was a miniatures game, but really it was a living card game masquerading with miniatures on there because you needed all the cards, you needed all the stuff. And that, certainly the Star Wars IP, you can't compete against that. And for a number of years before GW kind of rewrited itself, X-Wing Miniatures was just trashing 40K. It was just destroying 40K everywhere for at least a good 3 or 4 years in sales. And while I thought at the time that it was on the strength of Star Wars only, I mean, everybody knows Star Wars. It's our culture. It's our DNA. 2,000 years from now, looking back, Jedi is a religion, but looking back, everyone's going to think, it was some sort of religion on there. And then we find out, no, it's from the sale of cards, because to play in the game, you needed the cards to do it. So even if you were, I always loved playing the good guys, flying the Imperial Navy, restoring order against rebel terrorists, but I had to buy all those rebel ships because I wanted to get the cards, and I wanted to get the upgrades, and I wanted to get the missiles and the bombs and everything to utilize. So you build up this collection, even if you weren't going to play a specific faction on there. 2.0, now it seems like, I understand they're getting away, they're pushing towards the apps and online, but where's the model to get me to buy dozens and dozens and dozens of ships, every ship that's out there? I don't know. I really can't say. Maybe the model is just to get everyone to rebuy and make us pay $500 for upgrade kits. Who can, if you want to do your whole collection, who can say? But I bring in X-Wing because the starter sets in X-Wing, and this is true of a lot of Fantasy Flight stuff. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings, the living card game, which I admittedly I love. It's fantastic. It's not a question of the value and the components, but it's the business model, and business model in a good way. I mean, this is what we would all do. The core is crippleware. You buy it, it gives you enough to play the game and get a taste, but it's going to get old really, really fast, and replay and tactical value just isn't there. Okay, well, I can pop down to Barnes & Noble and buy a bunch of ships and jump in. Yeah, that's the whole point. Instead of spending $30 or $40, now I'm in for like $150. That's just what it is, and it works. Games Workshop just soaks you on the miniatures up front, and after a while you're like, oh, $60 for Blackstone Fortress Amble? Yeah, that sounds perfectly normal. That sounds perfectly fine. But with Battletech, the starter set here, you could just play with that for a long, 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 long time. It gives you the enjoyment of playing the game if you're looking for a new miniatures game without having to rush and figure out what you're going to buy next and immediately buy stuff. It gives you time to really develop your play style and see where things are going and see what's happening on there. So let's talk D&D for a moment. Then we'll talk about the last piece on the checklist here, board games, what's upcoming. So looking back at my stats and looking back at the adventures I've played, I've primarily been playing a monk in this edition. And it's interesting because with every edition of D&D, I tend to favor a certain class. Part of it is based on the rules in the time. Part of it is also based with the group that I'm currently playing. Everyone takes a role. So I know one friend always plays the fighter, so I'm not going to play a fighter. Another friend, just every edition for the past X editions since we've been playing since 3.x, 3.0, he's always played a rogue. So I'm not going to play a rogue on there. I've always kind of been the wizard, the arcane caster, the sorcerer, and I've enjoyed that. But I find myself stepping away from a little bit. I can't even believe I'm saying this. Stepping away a little bit from arcane casters simply because, and this isn't a criticism, this is a reflection on the local meta, a lot of the DMs in the games that I'm playing, fantastic DMs, but I think it's a symptom of 5th edition. It seems to be, even though it's not rules heavy, and there's a lot of pieces that you can choose to use or not use, so it's not rules dense. It's not like we're jumping into AD&D, but it seems like a lot of DMs take it literal as it is, here are the rules, and there's a little bit of inflexibility in there. And as a wizard, as a sorcerer, yes, look, I'm going to have my damage-dealing spells. We're going to need that. But a lot of the spells that I like to take are what I would call influence spells. I'm creating illusions, creating phantasms, creating summons on there, doing charm or influence or holds. And that requires the DM a little bit to work with you on it. And 5th just doesn't seem to have to allow that out of the box. It's kind of like, here's the checklist for the DM, here's the flow chart. So I found it to be somewhat limiting on there. With a monk, I like the idea of the martial arts. I like the idea of ki as this kind of magical system in there. I wish Quivering Palm was actually decent and used to do like it did in AD&D, and that's not old school wish listing, but I just feel like with the monk, as you move up into the higher echelon and upper levels, what I term HLE, high level abilities, like they're okay, but they're not like, I'm a martial arts master up there. I should have better abilities. But what I really like about the monk is very opportunistic. That was a little bit of a tongue twister there. I don't have the raw damage dealing as a fighter. I don't have the pure hit points, say, as the barbarian. I don't have the diversity of pulling in 2 very powerful spheres like the cleric. Cleric's got mad spells. Cleric can also throw on some serious armor and get up there and smash face and stuff. And everybody loves the cleric because you need those heals, heal bot on there. The monk is, I guess the monk is like a space marine in 40K. It's not really great at any one thing, but it's pretty good a little bit at everything. And what I find tactically with the monk is if I'm in the right place at the right time and I unleash that fist of fury, I don't do the Kenshiro noises. I did that for a little while when I would attack, and I was asked not to continue doing that, a little bit of sad face. Then I just got the clip on my phone and would play that, but I was stopped to ask doing that. So, okay, I'm a little bit more reeled in. But that's what I see as a monk, right? I get all buffed, the man with the 7 scars, the shirt comes off, and we're like, pow, in there doing that if I can get in that right place at the right time. And I find this interesting with playing with other DMs. Not that I'm looking to sabotage the game, not that I'm looking to metagame and power game and ruin the time and effort that they put into their adventures. Because certainly being a DM, I'm like 70, 80% DM. That's what I do most of the time. I respect the craft on there, and I know the love that goes into that. But I find that I'm able to take DMs by surprise in 5th edition, maybe because the monk is perceived to be so underpowered, which if we're just going raw stats, roll up some characters, throw down the character sheets and look side by side. That's only half the story. Monk is weak on everything in there. Weak sauce. But you pull that off, you're in the right position, and it has the flurry of attacks. It's got some abilities on there. I start spending the key. It's got the movement rates on there. It's really, really interesting with that. Put yourself in the right place at the right time. I find a lot of DMs, I'm taking them by surprise in a good way versus the other character classes. And on a side note, admittedly, less and less I play with like copper pieces and silver pieces. I've just kind of reduced everything down to gold and then what I call like pocket change in the realm. So I don't want to spend time if you're like at the inn where it's like, okay, you owe 8 silver, 3 copper, and you owe 2 gold, 20 silver, 1 platinum, 3 copper, and converting and this and that. I just assume that as a player, you got some copper coins, you got some silver pieces. Your day-to-day base expenses are there. But the big transactions for magic items, the transactions for looking at things like bribing guards or influencing the Wizards Council, going crazy in Waterdeep, buying off everyone that you can, that's where the gold comes in. So it's more of a bigger bank on there. That leads to encumbrance. Now, I'm pretty loose on encumbrance, admittedly. If it's reasonable and you can pull it off, I don't need to know exactly what and where you're carrying. And a lot of my adventures do tend to focus. I mean, it's Dungeons and Dragons. I do tend to focus on dungeon-esque adventures. So we don't have big open spaces to move. So speed is not always as important. But I say that so I don't look and sound so much like a hypocrite. All the DMs I play with, no one's tracking encumbrance. So that's where the monk kind of shines at the higher levels too, because if you're a fighter or you're a cleric, you're packing, massive amounts of weapon systems and armor and gear and stuff. That is going to slow you down, even as you're boosting your strength and stuff. The monk actually moves very, very, very fast. And at the higher levels with such a low kind of armor class, looks good on paper, right? 10 plus dexterity plus wisdom, but then when you get up to the higher levels, it's nothing. But at that point, everyone can hit you anyway, no matter who you are on there. So I find that the monk's speed, as it moves up, especially if it's augmented in certain ways as allowed, that gets you there when you're going to go all Kenshiro on someone and just, Fist of the North Star, just crazy type stuff. So I'm really, really enjoying playing a monk. Board games. Last piece, and then we're going to call it because it's getting way too late at night. I'm waiting on Zombicide Invader, and I have high hopes for it in terms of exactly what it is. I'm a massive fan of Massive Darkness. I'm a massive fan of Zombicide Black Plague. I have all of the releases for that, but I was never able to buy in on the Kickstarters for it for various reasons with it. And I always feel with those type of Kickstarters, the games are good for what they do. They really are. Throw in a bunch of miniatures, roll some dice, and make it through tons and tons in a whole sea of plastic. But if you don't have all those Kickstarter exclusives, it's like you wonder what you missed. And being a completionist like myself, that really, that's really hard on there. I was going to do a Green Horde. I was going to say Green Plague. I think it's Green Horde because that dragon, yeah, I was sold on that dragon alone on there. The ability to fight a dragon in that type of capacity, in that type of game, fire that ballista on it, get all gladiator on it. I was in on that, but just the absolute worst timing with a couple of car repairs and things. I wasn't able to get on it or do the late pledge. So when Zombicide Invader rolled around, I was like, well, we're going to go all in. We're going to do it. We're going to go all in simply because I really don't have that many sci-fi games out there. I mean, looking at my collection across the room, we've got Blackstone Fortress, we've got Zia, We've got Twilight Imperium. I've got Xeno Shift. League of Legends, that doesn't really count on there. That's really kind of it with that. Admittedly, most of my games are fantasy, dungeon crawler type things. So to have a real sci-fi experience in that, I was sold. Plus all the miniatures, plus the crossovers, and I'm really looking forward to that. I hope it gets delivered in Wave 1. I don't think it's going to be delivered shipping as in June. So if you push it back to July, August, that's okay, as long as it's before the semester starts and I can get in some good gaming on there. But the really, really big question, and this might actually finally push me over the edge to do airbrush, that many miniatures, they demand to be painted. They need to be painted. And this is, the fact that, admittedly, I can be straight up with you guys, Blackstone Fortress is still unpainted. That's insane, but I've been playing it so much, and we've been playing again through the campaign again with my friends. It's in flux. I don't have time to paint it right now. We are playing it with it. So admittedly, there is that feeling to want to paint my miniatures, but that's, I did Zombicide, Black Plague, tabletop, because not naming any names, the guys are a little bit of a rough bunch out there, stepping on miniatures and spilling stuff on the board, all worth the price of admission, because we've had some amazing times, and we continue to have some amazing times playing Black Plague. But I did 3 or 4 colors, a wash, a highlight, and some just very, very simple basing, some blood effects, things like that. It looks okay. It looks impressive tabletop. You get up close and you're like, okay, Fritz kind of just went through and churned these out on there. But painted versus unpainted, with that many miniatures and that scope and on play, it looks amazing on it. I don't think I can do that again, though. When I went into painting Zombicide Black Plague, I knew, but I really didn't know on there. What's the biggest thing I've painted, really, before that? My Tyranids with it, but not painting that many zombies, plus the expansions, plus the character packs. Even Dungeon Saga was a lot, but nothing like that. So I did it. It's on the bucket list. I'm proud of it, but I don't really want to revisit that on there. But Zombicide Invader, it's going to demand it. So that leads me to maybe it's time for an airbrush, and just maybe that would be a great thing to learn on, and just start. That might finally push me over with it, because to go through that again, I don't really think I can. So I want to close this by pushing out there, asking you guys the question with the airbrush studio, or the airbrush equipment, looking at something like Zombicide Black Plague or Invader, where we've got, I don't know what, let's say 300 miniatures, and the bulk of them are the same and mostly Xenos in this case. How long would it take to push those up to a tabletop quality with the airbrush? Is that something in a week? It took me about 3.5 weeks, maybe a month, to do Black Plague, and that was maybe an hour or two at night, kind of going through vlogs, watching your guys' stuff, doing that, playing some D&D virtual online, Skype-based with some friends, kind of networking, doing stuff in the background. I could have blasted through it quicker, but I'm wondering with an airbrush, and